I'm Luis Scott, managing partner of Bader Scott Injury Lawyers, one of the fastest growing law firms in the country, and I'm also the co-founder of 8-Figure Firm Consulting. I've successfully built multiple companies by focusing on leadership, operations, and culture. Using these principles, my companies have generated close to $100 million in revenue. But before any of this success, I started my legal career as a receptionist, and I worked my way up to becoming managing partner. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with leaders and entrepreneurs who have had the guts to step out on their own and the courage to face adversity. They share with us their tips for achievement, the challenges they have faced, and the glory of success. I welcome you to the Guts and Glory Show.
All right, Luis Scott here from the Guts and the Glory Show. I'm here with a special guest, Hunter McMahon, and we are going to be talking about all things cybersecurity. But before we get started, I want to do a plug for 8-Figure Firm. 8-Figure Firm Consulting is a business that helps law firm owners turn their law firm into a law business. So it's working for them instead of them working for the law firm. So if you want to know how you can turn your law firm into a law business, be sure to go to 8figurefirm.com. Now, I have the distinct pleasure to introduce Hunter McMahon. We just mentioned him. He's the COO of iDiscovery Solutions. And you want to watch this entire episode because we're going to be talking about cybersecurity. And I told him before we got on the show, we had lunch actually a couple of weeks ago. And I mentioned to him that this is stuff that like people love. This is, this is crime TV. This is, the networks. This is The Last 48. If you like any of those shows, that's what we're going to be talking about. And I'm excited to hear kind of a story. And frankly, we had lunch, and at that lunch, I was literally terrified. I was like, everyone knows everything about everything in my life. So like, it's like, there's no escaping it. But there's a way to protect it. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, especially if you're a law firm owner, really just any business owner. We have to be sure that we're protecting our data. And so I'm very curious to get into that. So Hunter, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with the juicy story. Give me the juicy story of something crazy that has happened in cybersecurity that people need to be aware of.
So it's usually not the things that you see on the TV per se, right? But it's the, oh my gosh moment, right? So we do a lot of investigations of employees leaving. So you've got a team member that leaves and they take stuff with them. And I'll remember early on in my career running an investigation out of Northern California. So you got a lot of tech companies up there where their greatest asset is their intellectual property. And you have somebody that put take before leaving on a folder on their desktop. And you're going, okay. And they put all of the product designs, everything in that folder.
Wow.
Immediately downloaded it to a flash drive, and then they deleted it. They didn't even double delete it. They didn't even try to, delete the recycling bin. But so often it's the common mistakes, or the a professional services firm that we actually helped here in Georgia some time ago. And we walked in and we said, well, where are your servers? And they said, well, under the table. We went, excuse us? And they literally had a rack of servers sitting under the conference room table where they were having clients and other people walk in, but it was the space that was available. It was there. They were growing so fast that they ran out of space. So they used the available space, which just happened to be under the conference room table. And unfortunately, they became compromised and we had to help them through that. But it's one of those scenarios that usually it's the simple things that are right in front of you. It's the email phishing attacks that somebody clicks on that bad link or something to that effect that then it spreads. And it's usually those simple mistakes that get you.
Yeah, email phishing, that's huge. I mean, I don't know how many times I have an employee, they'll call me and they'll say, hey, I got your message that told me that you needed 2 gift cards from Walmart and to upload them to this link. I'm like, that is not me. I'm not asking for Walmart, gift cards.
So I'll give you a great story from a law firm client of mine. I got an email from him, and he was a Google Apps user. So it came from Google, and it had a link to a Google Drive, and it said, can you check your AR and make sure that we've got it all so that we can settle up, which was music to my ears, right? You want to pay me? Absolutely. But it just seemed off. And so I responded. I said, is this a legit email? Should I click? And they responded back. Still didn't seem right. So I shot him a text and said, hey, I got your emails. Is it okay? And he said, no, do not click. FBI is involved. We'll call later. And it was
Wow.
one of those oh shucks moment, right? I mean, not
Yeah.
only was it the first email to me, but it was multiple emails, it was responses. Well, it turned out opposing counsel on a case who had shared the separate statement of facts, because that was a requirement,
Hmm.
then was infected. He then got infected by that attachment that then got
Wow.
somebody in the Ukraine into his computer. And only because he used a small regional bank did they flag the wire transfers. Otherwise, money from the trust could have been gone.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's super scary. And I think that we just take it for granted. We think that those things are not going to happen to us. We think that we're not going to be caught up in a scheme like that. And it's amazing how you can easily be, caught in that kind of transactions, so that's really cool. Now, you mentioned something about employees taking data. I think sometimes we don't realize that when you train an employee and they leave, they're already going to take their knowledge, but it's different for them taking what they learned that they can keep and memorialize in their head, and actually taking stuff, like taking the stuff that you paid them to work on. I mean, that's a totally different thing. Maybe explain why it's important to protect the stuff, even though they're taking the knowledge.
Well, so there's two fundamental reasons, right? One is it's your IP, it's your information that you've invested their time into because you've compensated them, and you want to protect that. Whether it's your templates, whether it's your client list, your recipes, your product designs, your any of your trade secrets, that type of information you want to obviously protect. But you need to have the right safeguards. You need to have reasonable security that protects all that information. Otherwise, you have a different issue when it comes to litigation. The other side of things is usually there's sensitive information, particularly for law firms. You have a lot of information on your clients,
That's
whether
right.
it's a business information. So you have their trade secrets, you have their IP because you are litigating their crown jewels. Or if you're dealing with personal injuries, you've got medical records and a whole bunch of PHI and other sensitive information that you don't want out there. And so you're protecting both yourself and your own IP, but also your clients' data, because their data is presumably in your files, which they have access to. So you've got to make sure you're connecting or protecting both sides of that equation.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that we're dealing with people's names, social security numbers, personal information that they don't want aired out. I mean, you have to be sure that you go above and beyond, especially in the legal industry, to protect them as well, because we have that fiduciary responsibility. So that's very interesting. Now, how did you get into this? Because, like, this is not a subject. I don't think they teach this in undergrad. Hey, come join a cybersecurity team. Like, how did you get into this kind of work?
So I actually have both a law and a technical background. So
Okay.
I was working for a law firm while in undergrad and thinking I was going to go to law school, and but wanted to make sure that I understood what the practice of law was versus the Law and Order we see on the TV, because you hear
Right.
all the stories. It's different. It's not that, right? And so I wanted to see what it was. And I remember the partner walking in. I was working the night shift of literally making copies at night for the next
Hmm.
morning's exhibits. And the partner walks in and says, "I think you'd be good at this." And it
Mm.
was this article on this new thing called iDiscovery. And so I started dabbling in that and I developed the firm's litigation support protocols and databases, and I started building databases and more and more. And I merged the worlds of tech and legal. And so got into more e-discovery and then decided not to practice law. So I wanted to have fun on the consulting side. I enjoyed the fact finding aspect of things and the technology far more than motion
Right.
practice. Motion practice to me was like,
Yeah.
do I have to? But going through mounds of discovery and then crafting together a timeline that we could then leverage experts to say, okay, here's what it was in the construction defect, or here's what it means from an economist standpoint, and
Hmm.
those kinds of things was fun. And so
Yeah.
I stayed on the consulting side and then started to emphasize and really specialize in the structured data side of things. So leveraging big databases and your phone has a database on it. So your
Right.
text messages that you send all the time, that's the database.
Hmm.
The a lot of the apps that you're using are founded on a database. So all that information resides there, and you can tell some really fun stories when you start getting and layering data together.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think that when I was before we knew each other, I just assumed if you deleted something, it was gone. And it's like you can literally find out anything from anyone, even when they deleted it. And so that's really, really interesting and scary at the same time. Like, you have to be very careful what you do online, whether in business or in personal, because that's how you get caught up with your information out on the internet.
So we used to give out pins to clients that used to say, "Caution, this pin contains ink. Be careful what you write."
Yeah.
Well, I want like a phone case and a keyboard that has that on there. You know, be careful what you type, because everything. And part of the notion, though, to properly understand is you can delete it from somewhere, and you could arguably securely delete it. But then, did you delete it off the destination? So you sent a text message to somebody. Did you delete it from their device? Did they take a screenshot and then send that to somebody else because they thought it was funny? You know, so it's this idea that, oh, I can hit delete here and it magically deletes everywhere, versus you've now put out a signal of digital breadcrumbs. And sometimes we can't get all the way back to the exact thing you said, but we know that you text somebody at this time from this location and all these other things are going on, and you can kind of triangulate your way back to the truth.
Right. Now, let me ask you about Siri and Hey Google and all that stuff. Talk to me about how that's being used to. I mean, I don't know if you guys you know have to protect people from that kind of use. You know, can people's data be stolen that way? Because I know a lot of people have fears that they must be listening all the time, because how else do they know to turn on? Like, talk to me about that.
So that's what I love, right? I'm sitting in a room full of judges, and who has an Echo or something like that. There's nothing wrong with those devices, but it's the idea of privacy. And so if it knows to respond when you say Alexa or you say Google, and how does it know how to respond? Well, it has to be listening. And now you can go to any one of their devices and look at their retention policies and all that kind of stuff and understand each one of those. But for the majority, a lot of people have those out of convenience. They don't understand the consequence. They don't understand, they're not informed consumers per se. But I think, I actually just talked to a friend and colleague of mine and who's in the banking industry. And the bank has actually put out a memo that says you cannot be working from home in the same room as one of those devices. Because what they're worried about is they're not worried about it hearing something and that employee getting exposed, but rather the fact that it's sensitive information, and where they used to have the security of their offices who talk about that sensitive information. Now, when you have employees working from home, who else is listening? And they're needing to meet their obligations to their consumers, that they are protecting their information from leaving their control. That they want to make sure that everybody working from home are putting the proper safeguards in place.
And that makes sense. Even in the legal industry, we have a duty of confidentiality to our clients. Well, if you're at home and your spouse is there and your kids are there and your friends are there and their kids are there, and they may be doing a virtual class while you're talking about something sensitive, and it could be overheard by someone. Like it's amazing. Technology is really a powerful tool and a good tool, but it's amazing how much more protection you have to be aware of in this environment.
Yeah, and the way I used to tell clients is when I walk through an airport, which I used to do a lot, haven't traveled in a year. This past weekend, I actually made it to Blue Ridge Mountains, but prior to that, I hadn't traveled in a year. I would use project code names, or I would say the first custodian or the custodian out of Houston or something to that effect, or this device, that device. I would never. So if somebody across the seat knew what I was talking about, they couldn't decode it, if you will, right? And so I assumed opposing counsel or opposing parties were always in earshot. And if you think that same way with electronics, you need to put the same kind of safeguards and make sure that you have the proper protection. Are you sending unencrypted files, via unsecure email, or are you sending it through secure channels? Are you making sure your devices are encrypted? Are you making sure that you're not sitting there in an unencrypted channel of communication, sharing social security numbers or credit card numbers or some of that stuff that, sure, it's convenient, but it has its consequences to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, talk to me about cloud-based servers, because we have a cloud-based server for our CRM, our customer relations management software. Some people are anti it. Like we've gotten into discussions. When I say we, some lawyer mastermind groups have gotten into discussions about whether you should use cloud-based servers versus a traditional server that's secure and so forth. What's your take on that?
It depends.
Okay.
Come on, I gotta throw a lawyerly answer at you somehow.
All right, appreciate that.
I think it truly depends on, as cliche as it sounds, reviewing the terms and conditions and what are you getting for that service. And so there are some fly-by-night, just applications out there that could be hosted in somebody's garage, but call themselves a SaaS provider, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus others that have proper encryption at rest. They hide fields that don't need to be viewed. How are you handling your RBAC or your role-based access control? So does everybody in your firm have access to everything, or do they only have access to information they need? And so that's less about SaaS versus on-prem. But if you're going to go on-prem, what are your security protocols? What are your maintenance plans? How are you making sure that your on-prem is actually as secure, if not more secure, than the cloud? Because most firms who are dancing that line don't have the full-time staff to actually make the on-prem, more secure. It's kind of this false sense of security, right? It's this false notion of, well, if I can control it, but then you're obligated to control it. And so where you have an army of people making sure that, a big market competitor or a big market share SaaS platform is secure because their entire business model depends on it. You have one IT person that is sitting there and saying, don't worry, I patched it last weekend. It's 6 months behind on patches, but it'll be fine. And you've got to balance the business needs and all that. And why are you going to the cloud versus why are you staying on-prem?
It's interesting because we had a server-based system in my old law firm, and it was kind of like that law firm that you talked about at the beginning, where they had the server underneath the table. Ours was in a closet, and it was it was just in this closet, and it was close to an exit door, so like it was easy, easy taking for anybody who was interested in it, right? They could just come on. But the idea, and granted, this was 15 years ago. Technology's come a long way, but the idea was like, if you go on the cloud, anybody could steal it. It's just easy login kind of thing.
Yes and no, right? A lot of these platforms have put into place safeguards that, yes, could somebody inappropriately access something? Maybe. But what are you doing to protect your accounts? And what are the access controls? And that's where vetting the service provider themselves is the same as vetting your new employee. You want to make sure that they've got the proper safeguards. And then what are you doing to protect your data in that database? So assume that both are databases, assume that both have access controls and all that. Or using things like two-factor authentication and just those small little things that make it harder and harder and harder. And then are you periodically reviewing your audit logs? Are you saying, well, who's logged in from where? So if I know all of a sudden Lewis is logging in from the Bahamas, well, I know it's Lewis because he's on vacation for 3 weeks because, the firm's working for him, not him working for the firm, right? And so you sit there and you say, okay, that makes sense. But could flags and alarms go off that you have an inappropriate access from a location you don't know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think we talked before about the two-factor authentication, and I've just always seen it as kind of like just an inconvenience. So I'm like, I don't want to do that. I just want to be able to log in. But I do think it's critical because there has been some situations where two-factor has been the reason I got notified that somebody tried to log into my account. And so I do think that and agree that that's super critical for, protecting yourselves and your platforms. Now, you guys do more than cybersecurity, and I want to make sure everyone kind of knows the extent of everything that you do, because there's somebody right now listening, watching, saying, I need to check my stuff because I don't want it to get stolen. And there's big business in it being stolen. It's probably billions of dollars being exchanged through the theft of cyber, information. So what are some other things that you do, your company does, to help businesses, law firm owners protect their businesses?
Yeah, so I mean, at the core of what we do is we're experts in digital evidence. And so we have a team that testifies on the digital forensics. We go in and examine those devices. We examine the mobile devices. I'll never forget a conference I was doing with judges, and you sit there and you look at them all going like this, and I got to get rid of this phone real quick and in a hurry, right? Because they realize everything that can be found. Then we also do traditional e-discovery. So all your documents, your processing, your hosting, and all that kind of stuff. And then we specialize also in structured data analytics. So we built technology, but our goal across the board really is helping our clients tell a story through the digital evidence. And so we have our different avenues of discipline that say, well, where's it coming from? How do we need to analyze it? How do we need to then proffer it back to the attorney so that you can take it and actually tell a story from it? Because at the end of the day, while trials may not be happening all over the country right now because of COVID, but you still need to tell a story, and you can tell a story through a brief. You can tell a story through arbitration or mediation. You've still got to be able to tell that story. And the more you can support that with evidence, right? Facts, the better your story can be, the more persuasive your story can be. So our goal is to provide that evidence in a way that you can then leverage to tell the story your client is trying to tell.
Absolutely. And the thing is that if you are unsure whether your systems are secure, you guys also provide like an audit, and you could do a full audit on all of their platforms or systems and make sure that they are, I don't know if the term is up to code but like, in compliance, so that they're as secure as possible, right?
Yeah. So we, as part of kind of one of the things we started noticing is both our clients, but then also the clients of clients and all that there's a gap between companies that can afford, a full-time CISO or somebody that does that, and they manage the security, and those that need a fractional or a virtual CISO. And so we also provide that security assessment that says, hey, we'll come in, whether it's once a week, once a month, once a quarter, and help you be better. The big thing here is it's always about being better, putting more roadblocks, more hurdles to make it harder to compromise your data, because perfection really isn't attainable. There's always going to be something. So the question is how hard are you making it to where, somebody that wants that is going to get bored before they get it. They're going to leave, and you have the proper backups to be able to recover from it if you get ransomware or something to that effect.
Yeah, I mean, there's someone always out there trying to develop a new way to attack somebody, right? I mean, you can never get rid of that.
And you got to think of it. So you got the attack mode, but you also have you're constantly introducing new technologies into your environment, right? So you switch a CRM. Well, all the holes plugged on your first CRM, you got different ones in the second one, or you add an add-on to your CRM that makes document generation easier. So you got to vet that. So it's always evolving to where it's truly a moving target. And what you want to do is make sure that your risk profiles are aligned with your business interests, because you can't sit there and have $1 million solution for a $500,000 firm. That's an upside down business model. But you have to have the proper safeguards for the type of firm, the type of information that you're handling, all of that, to where it aligns with your business as opposed to contradicts it.
Absolutely. So let's get onto something a little bit more personal outside of the business, and that is, what is your, I guess, secret sauce to success? For those of you who are listening and not watching, Hunter's a young guy, and he's a COO of a national cybersecurity company. So that begs the question: what is the secret to success?
Grit, determination, stubbornness.
Okay.
I joke, and my wife will fully support this statement. I am stubborn as a mule. Because once I set my sights on something, it's how do we get there? And so constantly reevaluating, what are you doing and why? So are you going to get up that morning and work out? Are you going to have, that extra cup of coffee in the afternoon where you don't get to bed on time, which will impact your morning? Or, am I going to take this meeting or that meeting? What is constantly putting us towards our goal? I joke and say it was an interesting year to become COO in 2020. We had a global pandemic, we had social unrest, we had economic crisis and all that. We opened up our London office, and we chose to go through with that. So we actually we established our international footprint April 1st, 2020, and we're about to celebrate 1 year of that office being open. And so you said, well, what's the mission, right? What's the vision? So we are an EOS shop that we operate off the EOS framework from the book Traction, and we really focus on making sure that the decisions we're making are going towards our vision. And we set the incremental rocks, we set the year goals, and then we also set our 3 and 5 year and say what's moving us towards that. And when there are long days, but I have fun. I mean, it's one of those things, as cliche as it sounds. And my wife was just telling me this past weekend in Blue Ridge is, you've been having fun despite the long hours, the late nights, and all that kind of stuff. It truly is fun doing what we do because I enjoy it and I enjoy the team. And so but it's not easy. It's simple, not easy. So it's a matter of sitting there saying, okay, I'm doing this. This is why, and prioritizing and executing and sticking to your guns and staying stubborn towards your goals, not relenting just because it got hard.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that that's the common theme really with most successful people is they're able to overcome the emotional desire to quit, because all of us have been faced with that desire where we just, oh man, is this even worth it? And I think that being able to overcome that is so critical, in getting to the next level in your career and anything that you do. Now, in this process, you've probably had to overcome something. And, this is a question that I asked to all my guests on the Guts and Glory show. And that is, what is the hardest thing you've had to overcome? What's the lesson you learned from it? And because that's part of the journey to becoming successful. So what would you say is that thing that somebody's going to hear it and go, I can identify with that for sure.
I'd probably say that the constant struggle is the detachment from the emotional aspect of business to the person and the business decision that needs to be made. So oftentimes, especially in a professional services world, we invest so much in our people. And sometimes I can find myself hanging on to somebody or a situation or something to that effect far longer than we should have from a business decision, right?
Right.
We saw the sign 6 months ago, but we're just getting around to the decision because it was like one more try. Oh no, I think they'll get it. Those kind of situations where, you gotta rely on the business side of things, and whether it's data, whether it's finances or the numbers or whatever. And sometimes you've got to be ready to make the hard decisions and understand it's not the cliche saying is this is business, not personal.
Right.
But you do have to have that separation. You have to understand that you're going to come up against some of those hard decisions, and it's going to be unfortunate, right? It's not going to be comfortable, but being ready to be uncomfortable and being okay with being uncomfortable in some situations. And sometimes that's telling a client the actual results versus the results they want.
Yeah.
They want to tell this story. I had that happen out of San Francisco in a whole bunch of mobile analysis of cell site information. I want to tell this story. The data doesn't provide it, right? And being able to stand that ground and say, okay, I know I'm risking a potential, issue on payment or what have you from a client satisfaction or a next project, but willing to stand the ground because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think staying true and authentic to yourself is really important. And believe it or not, that's hard to do, especially when you're faced with other people, because people are complicated. And you mentioned something about how it's business and not personal. I love quoting Michael Scott from The Office on this particular issue, where he says, it's always personal because business is about people, and people, is personal. It's always personal. So it's like, it's really hard to overcome that. And I think staying true to yourself and authentic to yourself is really more challenging than people realize that it is. So that's, I could definitely see that. Now, have you had a mentor or a book that has really impacted your life? And what did you learn from that mentor or that book?
Ooh, there's a lot of books out there. I have enjoyed. I do a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of Blinkist, so those short summary versions of some books that lets me kind of digest. And what it does is it turns me on to topics really quick, because I can kind of see whether a topic and how it relates, and moving on. But I've had a couple mentors over the years that have really helped me understand the different dynamics of being the consultant in the room and being a leader. And so I actually was recently giving this example of a client that challenged me to travel for a week without my laptop. I can't remember if I shared this with you.
No.
So I had been a doer. I was the one that would jump in and fix it. I was the fixer, it was the call at midnight and figure it out. And that was my response method. And the client understood and recognized that was changing, and I was building a team, and the team needed to be that team as opposed to me. And so what he challenged me with was literally get on a plane without my laptop for a week. And it forced me to work through the team rather than myself. And it was an awesome learning curve, because I had to be able to walk somebody through even database queries and be able to sit there and visualize something. I had my little iPhone screen that I could look on, but that was about it. And then be able to sit there and say, okay, here's what you're doing and here's why. And it really helped me evolve. I'll never forget that lesson, because it really helped me evolve from being able to do it and being able to lead others to be able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you just basically gave me an instant panic attack just thinking about that.
It's true though, and I've done it, and I've gone through the disconnects, over the years a couple of times. My wife and I went down to Mexico once. She took the laptop, the iPad, the phone, put it in a safe, changed the code, and said, "You get this back in 5 days." And you go through withdrawals for about 24 hours, and you realize the world's not coming to an end, and it'll be okay. But that's part of the art of building a team that you can rely upon. So I went up to Blue Ridge this past weekend. I think I answered 2 emails on Friday, and not a single phone call came in Friday, Saturday, or Sunday because the team was on everything. I came back Monday, stuff had been handled. Guess what? It was all okay. In fact, it was rolling smoothly. And so it's proof that, that's a better place to be, rather than always being the one person that they call. They know that they can call the team, and the team will get it taken care of.
Yeah, and the thing is that even if the world came to an end, you don't have your computer or phone to be notified about it, so you can keep on living life just fine. Just you don't have to deal with the stress of the world ending. It reminds me of when the quarantine happened last year. There was a story about a group of people who were out camping, and they were like on a 1-month camp, no phone, no nothing. And they left like a day before the world shut down. And when they came back, the whole world was shut down. And they were like, had no idea that people were like dying left and right. So it's like they probably enjoyed their trip really nicely without having that information. So
I was in London when it all started to happen, and we were over there getting all the final documents and all that signed. And I get this panic phone call and email from our US side. And it was like, we've got to stress test this, and we might have to shut down. I was like, what is going on? Well, I was 72 hours in London. I was under a rock. I was focused on those things over there, and all of a sudden came up for air, and it was like,
wow,
oh shucks, things have developed really quick and in a hurry. And it was a quick shift. I mean, if you remember back in March of 2020, it went from this is a cold to oh shucks moment.
Yeah, that was insane. So now, what word of advice would you have to someone who is trying to, climb the corporate ladder, or they want to grow their business, or they want to develop a bigger practice, a bigger business? They're just not getting to where they want to be in life. What would be your word of advice for them?
Figure out your true why, and then get gritty. So oftentimes people can be chasing a result rather than a destination. So why do you want to climb the corporate ladder? What are you really trying to achieve? What is your fundamental and underlying why, not the end result?
Right.
And then get gritty on the absolute relentless pursuit of that why, as opposed to the result. Focus on the why and let the result come, because you can't control what others do. You can't control everything else that's going on around you, right? You can't control a global pandemic or an economic recession or an economic boom. You can sit there and focus on absolute relentless pursuit of your why. And then because you're getting gritty, and because you're not saying, well, I'm going to stay out late, or I'm going to do this just because. You're focused on your why, you're pursuing that mission. And when you've got all your energy going towards that, you'll be successful. But you've got to allow some other factors to, come into play that may or may not be in your control.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the show. I think that people are going to find this very valuable. And if they want to find you, where can they find you to get more information about your services, how they can hire you? Maybe they've had a cybersecurity issue. Maybe they have a need to audit their intellectual property. Where is it that they can find you, Hunter?
Absolutely. www.idsinc.com. So idsinc.com.
All right. Awesome. So we've been talking to Hunter McMahon, and he's with iDiscovery Solutions. And if you want to reach him, you can reach him at the website. We'll be sure to plug the website down in the link below so you can check it out. You just click on it, go to his page, and you want to make sure you're protected. And now you've heard his story of success. So anyone can be successful. You just have to have courage, guts, and the grit to succeed. So if you want more information on other episodes, be sure to go to my channel and subscribe. Hunter, thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Guts and Glory Show with Luis Scott. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to share. For more information on this episode, please see the show notes at www.gutsandgloryshow.com. And join us next time as we talk to another leader in business that had the guts to overcome all odds for the glory of success.